Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well today. Today we're going to be solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. If you'll recall, the quadratic formula was that thing I made you write down for homework a bunch of nights while we were still in school, and we're finally getting to the point where we're going to use it now. So we've used other techniques already to solve these things called quadratic equations. We've solved quadratic equations by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. We've also most recently took a formative on solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So today what we're going to do is use the quadratic formula. The nice thing about this is we can always use the quadratic formula to solve any quadratic equation. Please make note of a couple of these things that I have over on the side here. Don't use your phone's calculator. It People have a tendency to do it incorrectly because of the way that you need to type the information into the calculator. I highly recommend going to desmos.com/scientific. You can type in the information just like you can type the information in on a graphing calculator. So I highly recommend you use that. So one thing I want to mention very quickly is that in order to use the quadratic formula, it needs to be written in standard form, meaning the x squared term, the x term, and the non-x term, and the equation needs to be equal to 0. So we need to make sure that that's happening before we use the quadratic formula. So the first thing we're going to do in order to use the quadratic formula, which is x equals the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, we want to identify our a value, our b value, and our c value. Note that the signs are coming along for the ride. So b is -5 because that's a -5. Now this is going to look overwhelming at first, I would imagine, but if you'll recall that my consistent piece of advice for the entire school year has been that if you're ever substituting information into an expression, a function, or whatever, put parentheses where you're going to put that information in, and then simply after that, substitute your information in. Now this looks a little bit overwhelming, but all we're going to do is we're going to clean this up into little pieces, okay, and then use the calculator to do the heavy lifting. So the opposite of -5 is +5. 2 times 3 is 6. And if you type this information directly into Desmos, you're going to get 133. Note, I did not take the square root, okay? So now what you're going to do is you're going to use the calculator and you are going to type 5 plus the square root of 133 in parentheses divided by 6. We want to perform this arithmetic in its entirety and then divide that sum or difference by 6, okay? So when you subtract, you're going to get approximately -1.09. And when you do the addition version, you're going to get x is approximately equal to 2.76. Okay, remember, we're going to always round to the nearest hundredth or to 2 decimal places. Now, we're going to look at just 2 more examples that have slight little variations that we want to make sure we're prepared to handle. So, for example, here on number 2, we can see that this is not in standard form. All of the information is not on the same side. Also, our equation is not set equal to 0. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract 6 from both sides to give us that resulting equation. Now, we are going to identify our a value, our b value, and our c value. My recommendation, and when I'm doing these on my own, I really do it this way. I write the quadratic formula out, and I do write the parentheses in, and then substitute your a, b, and c values in. I realized I forgot to highlight exactly why you want to always use the parentheses, and I will be sure to do that on the last problem. But trust me, you're going to want to use them regularly. All right, so once we've done that, right, it looks overwhelming, but all we're going to do is just clean up each little piece looking like that. And then in the square root, or the radicand, we're going to get 289. Once again, we want to evaluate everything up top first. Notice I didn't take the square root, right? So we're going to type all of this into the calculator, let the calculator do the work or the heavy lifting. And for the subtraction version, when we do negative 13 minus the square root of 289 all over 10, we're going to get x equals negative 3. And when we do the addition version, we're going to get 0.4, or for all you fraction fans out there, 2/5. Now, the reason why we didn't get a decimal that we needed to round was for the simple fact that the 289 is a perfect square. The square root of 289 is equal to 17. And so that's why we didn't get a decimal that we needed to round, or why we didn't get an irrational answer. Okay. So for the last one here, we have a quadratic equation. Fortunately for us, it's already in standard form. And so we can just jump in and identify our A, B, and C values. So I'm going to rewrite the formula itself, putting parentheses where we're going to substitute everything in. Now, I mentioned I forgot to really emphasize the necessity for parentheses. So I'm going to make sure I do that right now. If you'll notice inside the square root, what we have here is the quantity negative 3 squared. And negative 3 multiplied by negative 3 is positive 9. If you don't put the parentheses in, remember it will evaluate this first and then the negative. Apply the negative, or the multiplication of negative 1. And we don't want that, okay? So once again, it's just safe to always use parentheses, and you can avoid that mistake. Now, what's nice is this one's going to be a little bit shorter than the others. And the reason why is the radicand, or what is inside of the square root, is a negative number. And in the real number system, we can't take the square root of a negative number. So because of that, our answer to this is that there's no real solution. Because of, once again, we can't take the square root of a negative number in the real number system. And for all you fans of symbols and not words, right, we also have that null set and that symbol there, which means the same thing. As a reminder, when you're looking at these videos, when you're doing your homework, you can watch these videos while you're doing it. Pause the video while you're doing the problems and check to make sure you're following along and going through it the same way. Thanks for watching, and I hope you do well with this. And as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me. And I hope everyone's being safe and staying healthy, and of course, taking care of yourself and getting outside. All right, I miss you guys. Have a good day. Bye.